Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully everybody's doing good. We're going to kick off the first of a series of panels that we'll have today for day one of Quad A. My name is Walt Davis, and I'm going to serve as the panel moderator, which means I don't have to say a lot, but these guys do. So what we did this year is we tried to construct a couple of panels to make sure that we could get some visibility on the TRADOC capability managers and the program managers for General Gaylor and then for General Todd to talk about what they're doing, what's important to them, what their priorities are, you know, where they have their challenges and everything. And so we've kind of split the panel today with a focus on lift, future vertical lift, the fixed wing piece, and then I've got the odd person out here on the non-standard rotary wing, but I think it's very important on what they're doing for you to know about. So if I could, I'll do some quick introductions. Bob Shively out of the PM for FVL. Ramsey Bentley is the TRADOC capability manager for future vertical lift. Billy Jackson, the program manager for utility, UH-60. Rob Berry, of course, the program manager for CH-47 Chinook. Mark Levine, the TRADOC capability manager for lift. Tal Shepard, who came out of the Apache office, is the program manager for fixed wing, and Steve Clark, the former program manager in fixed wing, is now in non-standard rotary wing. So kind of the mechanics today is going to ask Steve to start off. Each person will talk 3 to 5 minutes thereabouts. Want to make sure that we do have a discussion here, leave time for questions. If they're really hard questions, I'll tamp them down. No, I'm just kidding. So important to hear what they're doing. So if we start, Steve, with you.
Thank you, sir. So the intent was to hold questions until the end of all the presentations, right? Well, good midday or approaching afternoon. Again, I'm Colonel Steve Clark, and on behalf of the roughly 160 some odd professionals that are either directly in or support the non-standard project office, thanks for the opportunity. Here to give you an update on not only our mission set, but also some of our accomplishments and our path forward. So from a mission, we have somewhat of a twofold set of objectives. One, we continue to be the DoD's sole acquisition lifecycle manager for the Mi-17 aircraft. Have been since about 2009 timeframe. Additionally, though, what has evolved is an increased demand to provide foreign military sales supportive aircraft platforms that do not reside within my fellow PM's portfolios or are in a unique configuration specific to that partner nation. So we're truly an FMS case-driven organization trying to build partner nation capacity, and has been an interesting and very rewarding experience. I will say I've only been there about 8 months, but we continue to grow. Currently, we have a fleet that we've fielded on behalf of our partner nations of about 313 some odd aircraft, 16 different aircraft types, and about 24 partner nations. So a pretty broad spectrum across the global environment, and we continue to see that increased demand signal. In the last year, we continue to overhaul and rebuild Mi-17s that directly support the Afghanistan mission set. We fielded MD-530s to Afghanistan, the Boeing AH-6I to Saudi Arabia, Huey-2s to Kazakhstan and Uganda, Kenya. And interesting enough, as the OH-58Ds transitioned into the Excess Defense Article program, we took those under our portfolio of umbrella and we fielded those to Croatia and Tunisia. So it's been quite the challenging year and wrought with, quite frankly, a lot of successes as well as the many challenges. Additionally, we're providers of CLS to our FMS countries, specifically Iraq and Afghanistan at this time. That's a complete tip-to-tail CLS force provider type of a package. Certainly the procurement of spare parts packages for other nations, particularly in South America, that request our assistance. And we see the demand that continues. And I think the challenges that we face are very similar to the main platform programs. And that's how can we be more responsive to our partner nations? What we often find is it's taken them years to secure and lock in the necessary funding to procure the aircraft that they need. So it's incumbent upon us to develop ways to be more responsive in how quickly we can get to contract and deliver those aircraft for them given their funding constraints at times. What we're trying to lay in place is a series of overarching multi-award task order contracts, or IDIQ type contracts, both from a procurement standpoint as well as a CLS standpoint, that will help us focus in on that agility and responsiveness to the FMS customer. So we're trying to lay in, somewhat of a BOA with the major primes: Boeing, Bell, Airbus. As we can provide that more timely set of solutions, we also are providing overarching contracts for training, CLS, and depot type work. The focus that we're trying to get near-term wise is between late FY18 and FY19 to have these contracts laid in place so that we can set the course for the future and be able to truly build that partner nation capability, because we truly believe in that mission, as well as we see how well that can offload some of the tasks that we see on the U.S. Armed Forces, as well as we look at a global security environment. So I'll transition now to Tal and be prepared to answer any of your questions at the end. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. And up until about a year ago, I thought Army Aviation, I thought rotary wing platforms. And I'll have to tell you, I took over for Steve about 9 months ago, and my eyes have been widened to the to how much the fixed wing fleet is valued by the combatant commander. Since the early 2000s, the fixed wing fleet has flown over 550,000 hours, and we every month have on average about 20% of the fixed wing fleet deployed in support of combatant commanders and worldwide theater operations. Something different from our rotary wing brethren here is there's no more green suit maintenance, and has not been for a while in the fixed wing fleet. Since the OV-1 left the fleet, or the force, back in 1996, all maintenance has been contractor logistics support maintenance. So we manage the contracts for that maintenance. That being said, this summer is a big summer for fixed wing as we transition two of our main CLS contracts. Those boards are currently finalizing the transport aircraft 6-year CLS contract. Will award in the next month and a half, followed by the ISR aircraft CLS contract, and that's a 9-year contract which will award roughly 4 months after that. So we spend an awful lot of our time working with the contract and working with CLS, so that we're providing readiness rate and force multipliers for the combatant commanders. Another difference in fixed wing for me is, instead of managing maybe 2 to 3 mission designs in our formation, we have roughly, actually exactly 14 mission designs in the fleet and 32 mission design series. So thanks C-12 Charlie, C-12 Delta, C-12 Juliet. So configuration management is something we take very important and spend an awful lot of our time on. On the transport side of the house, we have a third board that is currently meeting, Source Selection Board, and that just started Monday. That's for the fixed wing utility aircraft. That board has gone doors shut, and they're currently screening proposals right there now. We anticipate contract award the third quarter FY18 for the fixed wing utility aircraft, and then subsequent milestone C will be second quarter FY18. That's a program of record for us. We also deal with quite a bit of QRC capabilities that we provide the combatant commander. Most recently and near term, we are working on a Saturn Arch joint urgent need request from the combatant commanders, and then in very quick time, we've turned down around the whole contract process and are set to deploy those 2 aircraft later this summer. It's a pleasure being here again. We need to get a few more fixed-wing aircraft here in the hall to look at. That's probably my task for next year, and looking forward to fielding any questions. Thank you.
All right, I got to stand up. I'm Colonel Mark Levine. I am the TCM for the lift fleet. So I'm gonna try and reduce the acronym. So I'll tell you a little bit about what a TCM is, and I'm going to give you the short version. So the TCM takes care of the wish list for the warfighter, right? The warfighter's needs The TCM is responsible for seeing that those needs are met and working with the team of acquisition professionals that you see here to make that happen. The other thing that we serve the warfighter is we're the warfighter's voice, sometimes the vice maybe, to the different stages of the acquisition process and requirements. So we try to validate the requirements so that the warfighter can get the capability that he needs. We also represent throughout the cradle to grave of the program his needs, demand signals. So we work with the team of PMs to address those, to fix those. And we rely on their acquisition skills and professionalism to do the purchasing and the contracting, and we work with them to make sure it's meeting the needs of the warfighter. So that's the brief description of what the TCM does. As the lift manager, I get to work with just about everybody up here. I'm fortunate to say that as we talk everything the Army has short of the attack and UAS fleet. So from the fixed wing, the non-standard, the Chinook, the Black Hawk, and then Ramsey's work in the future vertical lift. So it's all in the name, TCM Lift. And what we owe the warfighter is payload. That's why we're here. That's why 70% of the Army's rotorcraft fleet is in the lift portfolio, and that's to provide payload to the warfighter. So some of the challenges that we've been facing over the last 15 years, especially in the COIN, and probably eternal challenges. So we owe the warfighter payload. Over the last 15 years, we've had to do a lot of modifications to the aircraft to be successful in the fight that we've been in. All those modifications have come with a weight penalty. So we owe the warfighter a payload, but every time we hang something on there, we're eating a weight penalty. And the only bill payer for that is the payload we have available to the warfighter. So if we're not careful, we turn our Chinooks into Black Hawks and we turn our Black Hawks into Hueys. So managing that weight growth is a significant challenge for us, and then restoring the payload to the warfighter. So you're going to see all of our major modernization initiatives are restoring that payload to the warfighter. When you look at an airframe, there's only a couple ways to do that. Powertrain, rotors, you're going to have to beef it up. That's going to be expensive and it's going to take a long time. The other thing we're doing is looking at a bunch of weight reduction opportunities on the aircraft. So we've fielded things rapidly because we needed to get them to the field. That did not always allow us to optimize the weight. So as the engagements we have with industry and talking with Mark Levine as the TCM, one of my first questions on a new technology, right? Warfighting capability, we know we need that. What operational benefit does it have? Immediately followed by, what does it weigh? What does it weigh and what is the weight penalty we're putting on the airplane? And I'm going to share with you some numbers, and they're rough planning numbers, but on the fixed wing fleet, we've grown about 600 to 700 pounds of mission equipment package. The bill payer has been the warfighter's payload over the last 10 to 15 years. On the Black Hawk fleet, we're close to 1,000 pounds and rising on the mission equipment packages to have that aircraft in combat. The bill payer has been 1,000 pounds of warfighter's payload. On the Chinook, we're pushing 4,300 pounds. So we have got to do a comprehensive effort to control the weight of the mission equipment packages, to reduce the weight of the mission equipment packages, at the same time that we invest in upgrading the performance capability of the plane so we can do what the Army's paying us to do, which is move equipment and soldiers for the warfighter. So look forward to your questions. And again, everything we talked about, the team of program managers is going to talk to you about a bunch of initiatives that their team of professionals has done to restore that payload to the warfighter.
All right, thanks, Mark. Colonel Rob Berry, I'm the project manager for cargo helicopters. We're organized along 3 product lines in Chinook. We have a Block 1 fleet, a Block 2 product office, and then an international product office as well. I'll touch on each of those and then tie up and look forward to your questions. So the Block 1 fleet is the CH-47F that we're all familiar with. We fielded just under 400 of a total Army requirement of 473 of the Block 1 aircraft, and will continue fielding through 2020. So that aircraft is located to your left in the back corner. If you haven't had a chance, the folks from the Alabama Guard were kind enough to fly in here to show us that aircraft. So that's Block 1 fleet, again, deliveries through 2020. Block 2, to get after what Colonel Levine talked about, is a series of engineering changes that we've incorporated on the aircraft where we would have done them traditionally in an incremental fashion. We've bundled them into the Block 2 program, which seeks to restore that ground commander's payload capability, Additionally, seeks to set foundations for future upgrades on the aircraft to where we can make affordable future improvements through this series of bundled engineering changes. And then the third objective there on the Block 2 program was to become more common with our special operations counterparts. Over time, we had diverged between the conventional Army and special operations, specifically in the Chinook fleet. And one of those objectives, again, on Block 2 is to converge those designs and seek to leverage each other's capability a little better than we have in the past. And the MH-47G and its latest variant is behind us, so I'd encourage you to see that as well if you haven't had a chance to see that. Block 2 program recently completed a Milestone B decision successfully, so we are ready to award a contract on that as soon as we receive a FY17 budget. From a schedule perspective, the engineering and manufacturing development phase will go through FY21, and we'll have a first unit equipped in 24 for the Block 2 fleet. Internationally, we operate Chinooks in 19 aircrafts, 19 countries today. We're always seeking to expand that, and we are particularly proud of how our international partners are able to operate Chinooks. We feel an immense sense of ownership towards helping them to meet their requirements, and when we see a Chinook flying around the world, we look to that as a symbol of the Team Chinook efforts, and again, we take that ownership and pride of ownership very seriously, and we always seek to ensure that our international customers can operate their Chinooks as efficiently as we do here in the conventional fleet. So again, that very high-level overview. I look forward to your questions, and I'll pass it over to Billy Jack.
Good afternoon, Colonel Billy Jackson, PM Utility Helicopters. First, I want to thank you for the opportunity to talk about what we do. Unfortunately, there's not enough time to talk about everything that we do, so I want to highlight a couple of things. First of all, our office manages 4 mission design series and all variants of Black Hawk helicopter, everything Black Hawk, one-stop shop. Lakota helicopter, same thing. CLS, we manage the sustainment of that platform as well as the production and fielding of that platform. And then common engines that affects both Apache and Black Hawk helicopter. Not to be confused with ITEP, that's going to be a different PM, but the T700 series right now, the 701D, very important program. I would like to highlight 2 things that we're doing to kind of give you guys an understanding about where we're going in the Utility Helicopter Program Office. So about 4 years ago, we set out to design and develop our own Black Hawk aircrew trainer. That program is called the BAT. Right now we feel that I believe 6 of these things very, very successful. So the concept behind it was we would team with our MR Deck brothers and we would develop our own simulator. We would own the technical data package, we would own the operating software of that, and it would allow us to do a couple of things. One, it would allow us to control the fielding of software. It would allow us to mirror that particular software that fields that device or supports that device to our current Mike model aircraft, so that when we fielded new software in the aircraft, we could immediately plug that software into our aircrew trainer and there would be no lag for the user. In the process, we probably saved, I won't go into numbers, a significant amount of money over the existing simulator that we had. So the concept now of a government-owned, government-developed device that we own the technical baseline for, that we can sustain ourselves, was really the genesis for the Army's newest Black Hawk, which is the H-60 Victor aircraft. So the same concept, government telling industry what we want to own the technical baseline. So that program was approved by the Army, sold that we could basically own that technical baseline. That software would be given to us, and that would provide 2 things for us. It would allow us to master our own destiny with regard to software sustainment, when we wanted to do it and how we wanted to do it, address obsolescence challenges, let us drive obsolescence decisions and not the industry drive those obsolescence decisions. And the most important part of it, it would allow us to compete 2 things, both the procurement, future procurement for that particular, the spare parts, as well as the software sustainment in the future. So January 19th of this year, that aircraft flew in its first flight. It's a very successful program, on schedule, and one of the very few programs that I know about that actually set a year out, set a first flight date, and met that first flight date. So that's what's important to us here, is that we have control of our own destiny, and because that allows us the opportunity to meet the warfighter's needs more rapidly and exactly what they want. And so that's where the utility helicopter project office is going. Every opportunity we have to be more in control of that process, we're going to take that. Thank you for your time.
Hey, good afternoon. Colonel Ramsey Bentley. I am the TRADOC Capability Manager for Future Vertical Lift. Future Vertical Lift really contains two different programs, the Improved Turbine Engine program and also the Future Vertical Lift family of systems. Improved Turbine Engine is a 3,000 shaft horsepower class engine that is the replacement for the 701D that we are currently operating in both the Apache and the Blackhawk fleet. What this does is that's going to enable additional capability in both of those airframes to buy back some of that capability that Colonel Levine was talking about earlier that we have lost. It's going to provide the capability to give both of those airframes an ability to operate at mission gross weights at 6,000 feet, 95 degrees and hotter. The second part of our TCM program is Future Vertical Lift, and once again, that is the family of systems. So we are looking at the replacement of the current fleet of aircraft all the way from an aerial reconnaissance, a attack, utility, and also cargo platforms over the future years. Part of the FVL program, or running separate to that, is a S&T program, the Joint Multi-Role Technology Demonstrator Program, where S&T is flying representative aircraft, technology demonstrators that are demonstrating FVL capabilities both with speed, range, and payload. What FVL does for the future warfighter is it is going to provide us the capability to conduct tactical operations from operational and strategic distances by increasing the speed and range of our current fleet of aircraft. Within the TCM, not only are we serving as the lead for the Army FVL development, but the Army is also charged with leading the joint development of Future Vertical Lift. So we are also the lead or the director for the Joint Requirements IPT that has representatives from across the services to include the U.S. Coast Guard and also SOCOM in the development of Future Vertical Lift. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Bob Shively. I'm the acting project manager for Improved Turbine Engine Future Vertical Lift. So I basically take the requirements that Ramsey gives me and try to turn them into a product, get a, in essence, to get a contract package out to industry to start developing and designing and building both these aircraft engines. So first off, on the Improved Turbine Engine, basically where we are right now, we have two contracts we awarded last fall for preliminary design efforts. Both are going well right now. We're looking forward to getting to a preliminary design review in 18 time frame and going into a source selection to down select between those two vendors towards the end of 18 and award an EMD contract in 19 to do the detailed design, the qualification, integration into both the Apache and Blackhawk aircraft, and flight test and qualify those engines, like was mentioned, to get to buy back some of that capability that Mark talked to that we've lost by adding all the equipment packages we have over the year. So it's going to create a much improved airframe, much more capable at the mission equipment packages, gross weights that we want to do the missions at out in the environment. So that's where we are in that program. On the FVL side of the house, like Ramsey mentioned, we're still formulating the requirements for that. We just got MDD in October last year, approval to go through with the Cape Set 3, which is the mid-size, medium class, if you will, helicopter or vertical lift aircraft that will, for the Army, replace the Blackhawk, joint with SOCOM to replace their Blackhawk fleet, and the Marines are in there looking to replace their Venom and Viper aircraft. So, that's the first capability within the family of systems that's in the barrel that we're looking to go through with. Right now, we're doing a lot of pre-analysis planning work towards the analysis alternatives. It's the first step we got to go through to refine the requirements, figure out exactly where we need to be with this and what capability we need in this platform moving forward. So from the PM side of the house, we're poising ourselves to be ready to execute and develop that, the specification, the statement of work that goes out to industry based on the results of both the AOA and also from the results that come out of the JMR Tech demonstrator flights to show what that capability that both the teams are developing and where that capability really can be and what requirements that really will enhance the future of Army aviation.
Okay, thanks very much. Terrific laydowns. And so if I could, prior to the question starting, and because I'm the moderator, I can ask the first question, right? So just to frame it, hopefully everybody or many of you heard from the Army Aviation leadership this morning, starting with General McConville, the G1, who is to be our next Vice Chief of Staff of the Army, and then to General Gaylor, our branch chief's presentation, and then to Bob Marion, who's at ASALT, the former Program Executive Officer for Aviation. These great leaders, both from a requirements perspective as well as a product perspective, live in a pretty tough environment right now. Everything is constrained in terms of budget. I mean, that is a reality. But our chief has been very clear in terms of where the priorities are. I mean, we have done an assessment, and it's threat-based, based on what gaps does our Army have in terms of its capability to address a peer threat. And then very clear in terms of how do the modernization priorities for the Army map to those particular gaps and how do we address them. They live here. The TCM's trade-out capability managers live in trying to sort out based on concepts of what we see in the future on how we're going to fight and what capabilities we need, and then I've got a right to that. And then the program managers have to figure out in terms of modernization, how do I put something in place that's going to give me that but it's threat-based. It addresses the major gaps that we have in our Army right now, and they live in this really constrained world where they don't have enough resources, both in terms of people or money, to address everything. But they do have priorities, and so I think that can frame kind of where your questions may come from to them. My first question is, and it's based on just my massive 4 years of experience of being out now and on the other side. And Mark, you started to hit on it just a little bit, but I'd be interested in your perspectives on what is the best way, or probably an efficient and effective way, for industry to engage you all on your either on requirements and or programs with that perspective in mind, that they understand, hey, we understand what the Army's doing, where they're going. So I'd just be interested in your perspective on that. If you're willing to offer it. If not, I'll offer it up to an easier question than that from the audience.
So maybe I'll kick off with that. I think that's a great question, sir. Thanks. So something that I think we're constantly presented with opportunities from an industry perspective to do things for the aircraft. So a fair question about where we could target those. And I think it goes exactly to what Colonel Levine said. I think from a weight reduction and or performance benefit to the aircraft, those are tangible things that I think, short of full program changes to an aircraft, we're always looking for opportunities to either remove weight from the platform or add payload capability back. So read that as performance. So short of bundling them series of engineering changes into a program, if a industry partner shows up with a qualified, technically understood solution that either reduces weight or adds payload, then you certainly have our interest up here at the table. If that can be delivered at comparable or reduced cost from what we have today, then we have a win. And I would challenge you to present us with an opportunity like that we would not seize. And I would say there will not be a case where you present that and a PM doesn't jump on it. So then acknowledging that oftentimes those types of things, either a weight reduction or performance comes at an additional cost, then helping us characterize how either over time that's an increase in reliability or a reduction of sustainment costs that would be offset by an initial investment, or in other words, mapping out that return on investment for us helps. So very high level, those are some of the things. I think as well on the software side, the eventual move towards a FACE compliant architecture, I think is preceded by what we have today. So showing us ways on the software maintenance side where over time that what we acknowledge is some recurring investment that's required simply to keep the hardware and software systems running as they were originally intended. So acknowledging that that exists, then presenting us with opportunities for reduction in either the amount of times you have to touch software or the opportunities to handle obsolescence in a non-traditional fashion. And I read traditional as a contractor saying, hey, this thing I've been selling you is now obsolete. I need some money to make sure that it's not obsolete in the future. So a non-traditional way would say a combination of hardware and software that together over time reduce the sustainment costs that we require to maintain the relevance of both our hardware and software. So easy to say, right? But the challenge, we would look to you all as the subject matter experts to come back to us and say, here's specifically a path short of full FACE compliance, which we acknowledge is going to happen in the future, but here's a path with what you have today that allows you to sustain the software and the hardware in a more efficient way. So a couple takes.
I'll tie in a little bit with Rob and offer from the FMS perspective. Oftentimes when I sit down with my industry partners, the leading question is, what can we do for you? And I try to counter that and say I would really appreciate if my industry partners have studied my marketplace, studied my customer base, and have done the research to identify what they believe are our needs or shortcomings, and that they're coming to provide a solution or a potential solution to that. Very rewarding when that happens, because oftentimes I equate it to my daughter's a nursing student, and I say, when you go into triage a patient, do you ask them, what can you do to help them? She's like, no, they're usually not even cognizant. So I already start performing immediate actions. That helps because we're very much in the near-term fight in terms of these programs, and oftentimes, we need you to come in with solution sets. I had an industry partner approach me not long ago and says, I can see you're having difficulties in time to award. How about if I approach you with an aircraft that you can procure right off the GSA schedule? That really piqued my interest. So it's with ideas like that that I believe that I would challenge industry to, do your research, try to come in with a set of options and potential solutions to what you believe are some of our concerns, issues, or problems.
So from the TCM perspective on the industry engagement, oftentimes folks will come in with something. We've got warfighters with requirements. So if what Steve mentioned, if you've thought through, hey, this technology I'm bringing to the table can meet multiple requirements. Maybe it improves maintainability. Maybe it improves payload for the performance. Maybe it also improves survivability. So if we have a technology or a piece of equipment that can knock down multiple targets, we're in a fiscal environment where we really can't afford one-trick ponies. So we owe it to the taxpayer as a steward of their investment dollars that we get them the maximum capability for the investment. So payload's important, but cost is king. So if we can knock down multiple targets with a capability and a technology, and we can start the conversation there, you've got our attention. And if you can help us understand opportunities to reduce cost, that's in the maintenance, that's in the sustainments, that's in different, the complicated web that we do resourcing and funding. If we can reduce cost in multiple funding lines, I can tell you, and if you can convince us in the first 2 minutes, you have our undivided attention, hands down, every time.
Thank you. Yeah. So, we all know that the future is unknown and unknowable. So one of the challenges we have with future vertical lift is really projecting out to the 2030 timeframe and beyond on what capabilities are going to be available, what is science and technology, what is industry IRAD dollars bringing to the future fight. And really, how do we project forward those capabilities? One of the challenges that Colonel Levine and I have is our ability to write informed requirements. So as we bring what the user needs, and then we convey that out to industry, and then we need the feedback from industry to know what is achievable, and then also what is affordable. So that is a big challenge that we have not only with the current fleet, but also with the future fleet. So we would ask industry, let us know what your technology projections are for 10, 15 years in the future, not only for the space, weight, and power savings on the current fleet, but also what leap ahead technology can we start incorporating in the late 20s into the future vertical lift fleet. One of the things that I think we do rather well with industry is we have a very open lines of communication. So that one-on-one interaction that we have with our industry partners, not only talking to industry about the developing concepts of employment of Army aviation, but also industry coming back to us and helping us with what capabilities are going to be out there in the future. And as already mentioned, we're working in a resource-constrained environment. So that collaboration between the two of us provides a better product to the end user, which is ultimately the soldier.
All right, I'll just add a little bit from my perspective, since, unlike the rest of my PM brethren up here, I don't have any hardware and much earlier in it, so we're focused on the requirements, so that's really in Ramsey's court right now. So what industry can do there, not only help Ramsey understand what capability might be out there in the future, but what is the real benefit? What's the trade-off between this capability and what am I giving up? And because I can't continue to add capability to the aircraft or it's going to get too big at some point. So we need to understand those trades in there as well. When you bring in a solution, what is the drawback in terms of space, weight, and power in simple terms? What does that do to other aspects, other capability that we may want on there? So help us understand the requirements at this stage and how they can expand in the future, what may be there, and what the trade-offs involved are in the process.
Okay, with that, 2 mics on either side of the aisle there, and please, if you'll move to the mic to ask the question so everybody could hear, I appreciate it, and we welcome any questions that you have.
Hi, Jen Judson with Defense News. This question is for Colonel Clark. I'm hoping that you can talk a little bit more about the Mi-17s in Afghanistan. Are they operational? Can you talk a little bit about training efforts? And it's my understanding that the Army has finally finished purchasing Mi-17s for the Afghan Army. And so what would be the plan in the future to continue to supply helicopters, if that is the plan, to the Afghans?
Thank you for your question. Try to break that down in a few parts. Accurate that we are no longer procuring new Mi-17 aircraft for the Afghan Air Force. But we are in the active business of trying to sustain that fleet. A very challenging fleet to sustain, not only given that the supply chain certainly leads back into the Russian Federation, but there's also challenges of op tempo. We've had some Mi-17s fly 90 hours a month in the last year. We try to keep that into some sustained train, advise, assist role of less than 35 hours a month per aircraft. That's a challenge because obviously they have real-time needs, and they're trying to support their core commanders. So we do continue with full CLS support to Afghanistan. We also have a train, advise, assist role that is provided by the Department of Defense, where we team with the Afghan Air Force, training them to continue to maintain their aircraft, employ their aircraft, and sustain their aircraft. That has been actually, I think, a very successful role. We actually oftentimes see some metrics that show about anywhere from 60 to 80% of the sustainment of the Mi-17 fleet is performed by the organic Afghan Air Force for the aircraft that they own. Significant improvement over years. We are also actively overhauling aircraft, and the intent is how can we sustain these, to the extent possible, until either the Afghans determine they need a different material solution, or some other decision is made and funded.
And Jen, I see you're still standing, so I know that you.
Can you elaborate a little more on the challenges? You said that there's 90 hours a month op tempo for these aircraft. Are they all operational, or is the op tempo high for some aircraft because not all of the Mi-17s are running at?
We're in and out. Average op tempo is certainly more around the 35-hour mark. We have small points in time when you'll have one or two aircraft that may fly, as I gave you a data reference there of 90. That's an extreme outlier, obvious. Are they all operational? Of the aircraft that are available to us, we try to sustain a 70% operational readiness rate on any given month, and come very close to meeting that, if not exceeding it.
The mic right there. Could you if you just stand and ask the question, please? She let her go first, and thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. My name's Group Captain Sarah Macmin. I'm a British Royal Air Force officer. I currently work with the British Army in the capability area, and I'm really looking forward to speaking with Colonel Bentley. I think it's early next week on the future vertical lift and how we operate together. We're delighted from the British contingent to be here, to be engaging with our American counterparts and all the industry. It's a fantastic event. Just building on what General Gaylor said earlier this morning, I was quite struck when he spoke about capability, and capability not just being about the materiel, and about also being about those organizational structures, about infrastructure, about how well we operate and work with each other. I think, certainly from my experience, that's an aspect that we struggle with, and we tend to default back into those equipment, that material design solutions. I would be really interested in your views on how you're looking to tackle some of those other aspects, particularly in the organizational structures, the infrastructure, and the better ways of optimizing the way we work across platforms, across nations.
So that's a great question, and there's a lot of truth in what you said. Is we have a tendency to focus on the material solutions and the procurements, because that's usually where the high dollars are and the scrutiny on the taxpayer. So at Rucker, the good news is the TCMs aren't alone and the program managers aren't alone on this team. So we have other organizations, Director of Evaluation and Standards, Directorate of Organization, Doctrine, and Training. So where we look at all those, can we train the problem away? Can we fly the airplane in a different manner to meet a survivability challenge? So as some of those teams aren't up here on the stage today, but we certainly do a lot of work with those organizations to find a way to mitigate the risk or mitigate the capability gap in order to get to yes. And sometimes we're doing that in tandem. We're going to need the material solution no matter what, but we've got to work the problem list to mitigate that threat or mitigate that capability gap until we can run the system and field the material solution. So I don't know if it's the exact answer to your question, but we're not alone in working the problem.
We have a phenomenal fleet of current aircraft. One of the things that we're trying to do with FVL, since it is a clean sheet design and we're kind of starting from ground zero, is we want to incorporate that joint interoperability from the start. And that includes across the board when it comes to not only operations but sustainment. The ability of us to design in reliability into the airframe. When we start from scratch with a FVL sustainment program, and we are able to look at the entire system as a whole, and then not only just look at it as an individual aircraft or as a mission design series of aircraft, but we look at sustainment in a different way across an entire fleet of aircraft. We think we're early enough to design in that joint interoperability, not only between the services, but also between our partners too. And that's one of the things we're really looking forward to. And frankly, one of the challenges that we have. But the ability of a future aircraft to be sustained between services or between nations would be phenomenal for an operational capability.
James Drew from Aviation Week. I've got a couple of questions, and just for the relevant program officers to take each one as they see fit. Firstly, could we get an update on where the military stands on the AH-6 Little Bird, either life extension or replacement? Also, I'm interested more in the Saturn Arch fielding. Were those two aircraft the ones funded in Trump's skinny budget? There was some extra money for another 2 Saturn Arch aircraft. Just tell us what they're addressing overseas. Also on the fixed-wing utility replacement, could you explain why exactly that's an important program? I think it's about driving commonality into the fixed-wing fleet. And then lastly, the big one I have is, where does the Army stand on capability set 1 for future vertical lift? And also, what has happened with the plan for the Apache replacement? Because it seems like it seemed more natural to go a CS3 where you could replace a utility and attack helicopter with a common airframe. So how have those two disconnected in the past year? So if we could just get each one to speak about that.
Will you be here tomorrow? Will you be here tomorrow also? So the panel tomorrow has the TRADOC capability manager and PMs for recon and attack, the PM for special operation forces rotary wings. So the first piece of your question, yeah, well, we can, if you'll say that for tomorrow, so that'll take care of that, and then the other three. So.
Thank you. With respect to the FUA, the fixed-wing utility aircraft, you've heard a theme up here from other PMs about range and payload. So the C-12, we're looking to get more range and payload out of that, and also the aircraft have been in the fleet for quite a while. So some are nearing, if not passing, their economic useful life. So commonality, absolutely. But the fixed-wing utility aircraft program will be built to replace the C-12 aircraft and then the C-26 as well for commonality for the fleet, increased range and increased payload. As far as the Saturn Arch, I'll let Mark answer a little bit of that.
So on the Saturn Arch program, so I'm not qualified to comment on where we're at on the funding and the programmatic, so I'm not prepared for that one. But I can tell you, having commanded the capability in combat in Afghanistan, it's a hyperspectral imagery capability. So if you think of that hyperspectral capability as an imagery capability that can then determine by pixelation that cannot be seen by the human eye and cannot be, it's better than any monitor that we can show. You can take that hyperspectral image and in a relatively quick turn through the GeoInt community, classify, determine exactly what was in that image, whether it's camouflage. So there's an incredible capability and a burgeoning demand for hyperspectral capability, both to solve some challenges that we have in the current fight with IDN threat equipment, and also as we evolve that capability in the current fight. It's fair to say that hyperspectral imagery is going to be in the Army inventory for a long time. Right now, it's flying on the Saturn Arch program.
And the funding side, it's not FY17 funds, it's prior year funds for Saturn Arch.
Okay, so for future vertical lift, so the future vertical lift family of systems right now represents 5 different capability sets. Okay, on the far left you have a CapeSat 1, far right CapeSat 5. The CapeSat 1 aircraft is really the aerial reconnaissance / Little Bird aircraft that we'd be familiar with. For the Army, that would have been the OH-58D. CapeSat 2, 3, and 4 represent the largest slice of vertical lift aircraft, roughly 4,000 airframes across the services. And then CapeSat 5 is the largest, being a cargo aircraft. really, right now, as far as the greatest joint need, that is in that capability set 3 platform, and that was why it was chosen to be developed first. So for the Army, that would be replacement of the Black Hawk and possibly the Apache aircraft. Also, it would be for the Marine Corps replacement of their H-1 series airplanes. So as we look at FVL being a joint initiative, as we divide or we look into the CAPE sets, the capability sets are multi-service initiatives and programs. So between the Marine Corps, SOCOM, and the Army, we're developing capability set 3. Currently for the Army, that is a utility platform. There is ongoing analysis for the Army to determine where is the future attack aircraft. Is that a Cape Set 1 aircraft? Could it be a Cape Set 2 or even a Cape Set 3 aircraft? And then as we look across the family of systems, there's different capabilities across the family of systems. A Cape Set 1/2 airframe is more of a tactical aircraft, where Cape Set 3 and higher is a operational or strategic airframe. You know, we talked about the ability to deliver a tactical capability at operational distances and strategic distances. That is clearly a Cape Set 3 capability because of the speed and the range of those platforms. Cape Set 1 and 2 being smaller aircraft would not have necessarily the range. So as we look at, for the Army, once again, Cape Set 3 being a utility, the Marine Corps is looking at Cape Set 3 as replacing both a utility aircraft and their attack aircraft. So the Army, through the analysis of alternatives, is going to learn from the Marine excursions on their attack requirements, and then we can also better analyze our requirements. We do not know right now if there is a mix of Cape Set 1, 2, and 3 attack airplanes. But as the greatest joint need is a Cape Set 3, the greatest Army need is the ability to conduct aerial reconnaissance and wide area security, which we believe is clearly a Cape Set 1 mission. So as we move forward in the next 12 months to 2 years or so, we're going to continue to do some of that analysis and then start to bring forward some of those requirements for those missions. That is correct. Capability, all 5 capability sets from the aerial reconnaissance mission up to the cargo sustainment mission, they are out there. They are in development at this time. And once again, we just brought Cape Set 3 forward first because it was the greatest joint need. But the Army clearly sees an aerial reconnaissance capability as the Army's '1 need, which would be a Cape Set 1 airframe.
And to follow on to your budget question, we'll all be glad when we actually have a FY17 budget and they release FY18 to 22 so you can get some insights into what's going on. But that's great questions. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Philip Kwan with Intelsat General Corporation. My question is about what do you view the role of satellite communications? Because from our perspective looking in, we see the Army requirements, especially for aircraft such as rotary, which is traditionally non-SATCOM, that requirement is rapidly increasing. When you talk about hyperspectral sensors, when you talk about wide area persistent surveillance, that's over 50 megabits per second. Now you're talking data, voice, video, command and control en route. So very rapidly, the push-to-talk radio is not going to work. Okay? But this is a new capability. It's not going to reduce size, weight, and power, and any of the other stuff. So what is your view on that, since there's clearly a requirement there, but it doesn't meet your metric of, well, it doesn't really reduce swap, it doesn't really save us money, but clearly there's an operational requirement there?
So it just so happens that the TCM who handles all those things that you just said is sitting right there, my friend Ryan Coyle.
Go ahead, raise your hand.
He refused to my invitation to the panel, right?
And he will be on the stage tomorrow.
Sounds good. Thank you.
But so we do acknowledge critical requirement, and just because it weighs doesn't mean we don't need it. In the near term, we've got it. We still have to have redundant capability. We have to have the beyond line of sight. So we're investing in both. And again, as stewards of the taxpayers' dollar, Ryan runs that in his portfolio, but we work very carefully throughout the lift fleet with Ryan and his team so that we're right-sizing it and we're resourcing that capability where the highest demand signal is.
Ryan's the lint trap of all the capability requirements that don't have a good fit. So, do you need us to call anybody from Aberdeen or anybody to come down to help out? Okay. If we could defer that, that'd be great. Discuss tomorrow.
Yes, sir. I would add that as we look to the future, and we've kind of coined the phrase joint operational network. And that is clearly a requirement as we move toward the future because of the extended ranges and the extended distances. And the other thing we've already talked on is joint interoperability. That is clearly have got to be a forethought as we move forward, and not only at the ground level, but also at the air level, multinational, et cetera. And that is something that we're looking at, and clearly an opportunity. One of the other things, and with FVL, the development of an open architecture system and the ability to plug and play. And really what we're looking at is, does a future radio, does a future communication device have to be a box? Or is it software-defined radios that clearly have the ability? As a future operator, if I have an ability to tell the system just who I want to talk to, and then that system automatically chooses the band, frequency, and dials it up for me, that's exactly what I need to decrease the workload on the crew in the aircraft.
Thank you.
Yes, hi. Lee John Greco, Flight Global. I wanted to follow up on the CAPESAT requirements. I'm wondering how the Navy's participation in FVL is going to affect CAPESAT 1, but really just all of the requirements across the board, since it sort of seems like they may or may not end up participating in FVL with this MHXX that they're exploring. So any of you can comment on that.
So once again, FVL being a joint initiative, the Navy is fully engaged. And also with the relationship that the Navy and the Marine Corps have, NavAir is also responsible for the development of Marine Corps aircraft. So we have weekly representation from the Navy in all of our meetings to include all of our requirements working groups. And really, so when you look at the Navy fleet, they are interested in replacing their Seahawk capabilities. And their requirements being shipboard operational, obviously the requirement to live inside of a DDG hangar and operate from a ship are a little different than the Army requirements. However, we still see a very common airframe there. If you wanted to look at the CAPESATs, most of the Navy requirements would reside in a CAPESAT 2 aircraft as a future Seahawk replacement aircraft.
Where does the CAPESAT 2 requirement stand right now?
Okay, the CAPESAT 2 requirements are in initial development at this time. The Navy has done some work, a capabilities-based assessment on refining their requirements. And then also that aligns with some of the Army requirements too, as far as a possible future attack aircraft or even a small utility aircraft.
Okay. If I can just, follow up really quickly. When you were talking about payload earlier, are you exploring any kind of composite materials for the fuselage of FVL? That way, you can basically have the same amount of computers, avionics, whatever, but have a lighter platform?
Yes, we are. In fact, we believe future aircraft are largely composite aircraft throughout the fuselage rotor systems. So we're continuing to explore the technology.
Thanks.
Anthony Garrett from L3 Technologies. This morning, General Gaylor mentioned a need for aviation platform to operate across the division and core battle space, and even suggested ranges of 200 to 500 kilometers. That suggests a beyond line of sight capability for comms. On the ground, the forces today that have WIN-T certainly have a SATCOM on the move, wideband capability. I'd be interested in your opinions on adding that same capability to rotary wing platforms, maybe a subset such as a mission command platform.
So, I think in general there is a desire to have specifically data transfer, right? I think and I'll defer back to Fort Rucker on how the requirement will continue to evolve, but network and how aviation plays in the network, I think it's well documented that we've proceeded and moved out with the ground network, and now we're trying to say, okay, aviation, it's not just aviation, it's fires, other elements that need to be a part of the network. There's questions about how that will happen. So that quickly gets out of probably these platform lanes, but I'd say there's a desire for us to participate in the network. There's a requirement for us to, but questions about the efficacy of the waveforms that we're developing today, I think still exist, particularly WNW, how, and certainly SRW to a degree. So those two waveforms, I think there's questions about how technically we interface with whatever the network winds up looking like. But the requirement is certainly there. If the Army is going to have a network, then aviation platforms need to be able to enter and exit that network efficiently and transfer data across the network. I think probably from a network perspective, this crew, I would defer back to Fort Rucker. And there are groups working with the G3, and as we continue to evolve Mission Command and how the network's going to play, how aviation's going to participate in that. And from a box perspective, we eagerly anticipate whatever that radio is that's going to allow us to do what I just described.
Yeah, the reason for my question is, as you may or may not know, WIN-T does have a CDD requirement for to equip A2C2S with the networking capability. And of course, that never happened because it was increment 4, and that wasn't funded. So the requirement is there, as you say, for WIN-T capability on rotary wing. As far as the WNW and SRW, those are both line-of-sight waveforms. So when you get into 200 and 500 kilometers, WIN-T and SRW are just not going to do it for you. So.
Fair, right, and so fair challenges that I think are presented back to the technical side, but on the requirement side, I think there's an acknowledgement that whatever the network, both the architecture and then the connectivity to that network, aviation, and frankly, all elements of the Army, I think specifically fires is the other one, having a clear path for how we're going to connect into that and have a robust connection where we can come in and out of it effectively, I think, are still questions.
Thank you.
Just a point of clarification on the AOA for FVL. Is the Marine Corps doing their own AOA?
It is a combined AOA. There's one AOA. The Marines are doing part of it. The Army Track Leavenworth has the lead for the AOA. CD&I out of the Marine are doing theirs because they have models for their aircraft, their missions. So they're doing a lot of the operational effectiveness modeling for their mission sets, and then there will be a combined, at the end, basically. There's a split. There's a lot of joint effort. There's a lot of split, but they're leveraging each other, and then there will be one final report. It won't be two separate AOA reports. There'll be one.
Okay, because it's my understanding the Army isn't looking at attack in the AOA for the capability set 3 variant of FVL. So is the Marine Corps kind of going off on their own to look because they want attack in capability set 3?
Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. And I also wanted to ask, last year there was a lot of talk about the weight problems that the current aircraft have. So I'm curious, and I know you touched on this a little bit, but if you can tell me a little bit more of a strategy on what you're doing now to, I guess, put the aircraft on a diet from the various PMs.
So so for Chinook, we had around 4,300, 4,287 pounds of mission equipment that's been added to the aircraft. So really the genesis of the Block 2 program was how can we address that? So I mentioned those 3 objectives. The first 2 of them get after that, right? So restoring payload and then setting conditions for future affordable upgrades to the aircraft to restore that capability over time. right? So to the first one, the airframe itself in the Block 2 program for the Chinook will go for the conventional Army from a 50,000 pound max gross weight to 54,000 pounds. So a key portion of limitations of the aircraft at sea level had been just the gross weight of the aircraft. So that will address that. Another key portion of the Block 2 program is the new rotor blade. So the Advanced Chinook Rotor Blade is a cornerstone of the Block 2 program. It restores 1,500 pounds of thrust performance in high hot conditions. So specifically 4K95 as the design point, delivering capability where today we're engine limited, where we can restore payload in the high hot conditions. And then just one example of weight reduction, which actually increased capability while we were doing it, is the fuel system in the Block 2 program will go from the 6 tanks that we have, fuel tanks that we have on the legacy Block 1 aircraft to 2, right? So an integrated tank on each side. Both weight reduction and an addition of 110 gallons of capability. So while reducing weight on the aircraft, adding capability. So those are some of the examples in the Block 2 program to both increase performance and reduce weight at the same time. That second part is the setting the conditions for affordable future upgrades. So in all of those design points in Block 2, we made the modifications to the aircraft, acknowledging that over time, the Army will likely come in with more mission equipment to add to the aircraft, and making sure that we acknowledge that both from a space, weight, and power, but also have design robustness where, say, in an engine, if we wanted to come into Chinook with an engine, that all of the conditions existed to affordably add capability like an engine in the future.
So, and one thing is we're not doing this on our own. So we're working with our international partners, the Chinook Worldwide Operators Group, and we have ongoing working groups looking at things such as composite drip trays instead of metal drip trays that'll shave 70 to 80 pounds off the airplane. We're looking at better, moisture's coming into some of our soundproofing, oil and fuel that's adding permanent weight to the airplane. So there's another opportunity to shave 30 to 40 pounds. So in each airframe we have several we have working groups looking at the airframe from nose to tail, looking for those opportunities to add additional weight reduction or to pull additional weight off the aircraft and, again, restore the payload. So some of those are tied to very complex performance upgrades across the board fleet-wide, and some of these are isolated as simple as transferring a metal drip tray to a composite drip tray. Prototypes on those are built, and if we can get that to a part number, then we can propagate that weight savings fleet-wide in a very rapid, very quickly, much quicker than we can put the Advanced Chinook rotor blades as part of that long-term fielding plan.
Sir, you get the honor of the last question for the audience today.
Thank
as
you.
we wrap up. Thank you.
Rudy Ostwich of the Parker Ostwich Associates. And this question is not for Walt Davis. It's for FVL. Both questions, two questions related actually to FVL. Thanks to JMR, the technology has, for what would be applicable to CapeSat 3, has really matured nicely. Got a technology demonstration phase going on, and at the end of that, FY19, we should have a pretty good image of what the technology has to offer, generally speaking. And in recognition of that, FVL has accelerated milestone A from what was FY21 to now third quarter FY19. Now the question is, because technology is advanced, is there a thought going on in the acquisition strategy for CapeSat 3 to accelerate the rest of the milestone calendars, which I understand today milestone C still sits at FY29, whereas one would think that you could accelerate that by 2 or 3 or 4 years. So my question is, from an acquisition strategy standpoint, are you given serious consideration and in recognition of technology advancements to accelerate the strategy, get to milestone C, and field CapeSat 3 quicker than what is now posted? The related question has to do with the newly emerging interest in CapeSat 1 and the Army's recognition of a priority capability gap for a Aero Scout type aircraft. If the Army, and oh, by the way, the Army is the service lead for capability set 3. So if the Army only has $1 to spend, and it's the service lead for capability set 3, and it's the joint priority, does it spend it on capability set 3, or does it spend it on capability set 1?
All right, I'll start with the first question anyway. Yes, from an acquisition strategy, we're certainly looking at all options to move the program and get it to the field as quick as possible. Regardless, like you said, JMR is going along well. Hopefully it proves out everything we think it's going to prove out with the technology, the maturity, getting to a point where we can incorporate it in FVL. Given that aspect, though, there's still technology demonstrators, and there's still a finite amount of work that has to be done to design these aircraft to meet the operational environments they're going to face in, to be maintainable, reliable for what we expect out of an aircraft we put in the field. So there's still a considerable amount of engineering work. There's not technology left to be done and developed, but there's still a considerable amount of engineering to be done to design these aircraft and qualify them so we can put troops in them and bring them home safely. So we're looking at that, but given whether we go in at a milestone A, milestone B, there's still a finite amount of design, development, and qualification effort that needs to be done. And right now we're focused on as much as we can do on the front side of getting the AOA done, getting the requirements from an operational standpoint solidified so that we can translate that within my shop into a technical requirements, and in both terms of a spec and a statement of work that we can hand to a contractor to bid on and then evaluate and develop. So we've got all those pieces that we are trying to compress as much as possible within a reasonable amount of risk without, going too fast.
Yeah, just to add that a little bit, we are still refining our requirements for Cape Set 3. And obviously through the analysis of alternatives, we're going to continue to refine those requirements. JMR program is doing a tremendous job of demonstrating those technologies, but as Bob says, they are not production representative aircraft. Number one, because we have not given them, they do not have a final requirement, and then they don't have a lot of the mil-spec systems that are required on those aircraft. So we owe that to them, so therefore we're not moving, probably unable to move as fast as we may want to for Cape Set 3. As far as the second part of the question there, part of that analysis is going to occur in the AOA, and then the remainder of the analysis is going to occur outside of the AOA. But really, as we move forward with the Cape Set 3 platform, and then our ability to bring on a Cape Set 1 platform, really has to be informed by the work that we're going to do during the AOA. It also has a lot to do about our partnership with other services on the Cape Sets. As we move through the AOA and we determine really we're going to move forward with FVL, then the next question is industry ready to move forward? We think they will be based on the JMR programs. And then also, the third question really is, what's our level of joint interoperability, and do we have a truly joint platform or a multi-service platform, and what does that acquisition program look like? So a lot of that work is going to be done over the next 12 to 18 months as we move through the AOA.
Okay, well, on behalf of all of you, I'll thank these great aviation leaders for the time that they've spent today talking about the requirements and their programs. They've got a heavy load, and they're doing great things under some really tough circumstances. So I just want to personally thank you for taking the time to do that. And Jen, thanks for leading the way on the questions that we'll read about tomorrow inside the Army. That'll be fantastic, or whichever. Oh, Defense News. I've probably said something wrong, but anyway, thanks for your participation. Just a paid political announcement. So tomorrow we have 2:30 to 3:30, same location here. We'll have the capability managers and the program managers for recon attack. We'll have aviation systems. We'll have aviation survivability equipment, and we'll have Special Operations Forces tomorrow. So last year, as you recall, I had the privilege of having the last panel at Quad A, and all of the exhibit hall was coming down, around me, and there were like 3 people in the audience. You got to give the PMs and TICMs tomorrow some love, many of who are standing out there. So again, thanks very much, and leaders, thank you. Appreciate it very much.